In today's episode, we look at how two dealers took over a Maxfield town in Cheshire, recruiting dealers to work solely for them. Any competition would be run out of town. A 19-year-old ex-football coach would be recruited for muscle. A supplier with a smart way of moving product, and a Manchester gang would attempt to take over. It would end in murder in a forest over a missing shotgun. In 2013 in Maxfield in Cheshire, two dealers began a takeover of the area and started a turf war with other dealers. Charles Beadle and Ricky Jervis, both 22 years old, began a recruitment drive with heavy violence. Whatever dealer was out there, you now work for us. They flooded the town with their Class A product. They soon quickly took over, and anyone who wasn't towing the line soon was or had fled town. Charles Beadle and Ricky Jervis were making over 30 grand a month after the takeover. He recruited Zans, who was 19 years old, a prolific user. He was a promising football coach, but the addiction had got him. He became unreliable and soon lost his job. He was recruited as muscle for the gang, which worked out really well. He had the nickname by the gang Black Magic. He had a knack of turning dealers to Charles Beadle and Ricky Jervis's cause. He was paid mainly in product with some cash. Jervis and Beadle had control over Zane. He was the wind-up muscle, pointing at the target and watch him go. It was amazing how fast they had taken over the area, but there was a reason for their rapid success. Behind dealers Charles Beadle and Ricky Jervis was William Dale, a major supplier. He operated from a canal barge, and it would never spend the same night moored in one area. From the barge, the product was supplied and would be the main base for the takeover of the town. This though didn't go unnoticed, and a small upcoming Manchester gang was watching and attempted to take over the dealers Beadle and Jervis had recruited. It ended up in tit-for-tat violence. The people who were getting hurt though were the dealers of the town. The Manchester gang had a supply problem. It slowed the takeover with major arrests of the Manchester's gang suppliers by the police. With a final push, Jervis and Beadle managed to defend what they had taken over, with Zane Salisbury as the muscle. After the Manchester gang became aware that the supplier William Dale was behind the takeover and the major supplier to the area, the Manchester gang, still in Maxfield, decided to lay low and reduce the violence as it was attracting too much police attention. The house where Zane Salisbury lived with his mother had become a target for the Manchester gang, with youths being recruited to vandalise his mum's car and house. His mother and sisters were terrified, and she installed new locks, a safe room with panic alarms, and a fire and bomb-proof letterbox. There were some dealers though who started working for the Manchester gang. There was a target Zane Salisbury was contracted to sort out. He was given a shotgun and was told not to kill the dealer, but convince him for his long-term health that he better pick a better side. This dealer you see was ringleader to other small dealers. If he fell in line, then those who worked for him would follow. Zane Salisbury was driven to the home address of the dealer by Charles Beadle. Zane walked straight up to the front door of the house and fired 2 shots through the letterbox. Inside the house was the dealer and his young family. The next day, the dealer switched sides and started working for Jervis and Beadle. With the final fight over, the takeover of the town was complete. The Manchester gang fragmented and left the area, with some being arrested and others wanted by the police. After the gun was used in the attack on the dealer, the cartridges were hidden in church grounds and the shotgun was hidden in local woods by Zane. At this time, Zane Salisbury had started to become unreliable. He wouldn't turn up for collections. If he was there, he'd be unmanageable and difficult and answer back. They started to stop using him, meaning he was no longer getting paid in money or product. With Zane Salisbury's crippling addiction, he's about to drop himself right in it, big time. Zans Salzman one morning went to the woods where the shotgun was and dug it up. He then sold it to a rival dealer out of town to feed his habit. With the rest of the money, he fled to Blackpool and went into hiding. Days later, he'd still phone his mum, asking her for money. But one day, Zans Salzman's mum received a very disturbing Facebook message from Charles Beadle that said, people were coming to the house as her son had taken something from him. She refused to answer the door and threats were made to petrol bomb her house if she didn't open up. Zane's mum was called by her son from Blackpool asking for money again, but he was different this time and he was crying, which wasn't like him. He admitted carrying out the shooting with Charles Beadle. I was shocked, especially as children were in the house. I didn't know what to do. I didn't transfer money, but said he'd have to come back. I tried to make him see sense about the shooting. I couldn't believe he could stoop so low. He said it was him who pulled the trigger. No one else had the bottle to do it. I then told him to turn himself in. Jervis started sending messages to Zane, saying you need to come back so you can sort this out. We need to get the shooter back. You can come back and then work for us. Zane replied, it's not a setup or anything. And Jervis replied, what are you on? You're one of the boys, I trust you. Zane was collected later the next day by relatives from Blackpool. On October the 30th, Jervis and Beadle met up and picked up Zane from his house. Driving the car was Julia Howard, who was 36 years old and was Beadle's girlfriend. She was a student, training to be a forensic psychologist. We need to go to the woods and get the shooter, said Beadle. Zane led the two into the woods to find the non-existent shotgun he had taken from its hiding place buried in the woods, and then dug up and sold for a fix. Zane had pretended to look for the gun, making it look like someone else had found it and took it. Zane was digging around for a couple of minutes with his hands, looking a bit confused, and then got up. Charlie gets down and starts looking. Charlie Beadle shouts out, how do you lose a shotgun? You don't lose a shotgun. Zane then said they should come back in the morning and look for it. Zane swore on his mother's life that he hadn't been there or moved the gun, but Charlie Beadle started raising his voice saying, you're saying it was me who took it? They carried on arguing and then Beadle lunged at Zane with a knife and was stabbed. Zane ran off running between the trees and ran towards a fence at the boundary of the woods. Jervis shouted, stop man, stop. Zane said, what the hell's he done that for? After jumping the fence, he staggered away on the other side, dying from his wounds. Beadle, who carried out the stabbing, told Jervis, the kid thinks he can treat me like a muppet. Zane made it to the road and collapsed. Zane Salzman was 19 years old, was found by the woods on the side of the road. A passing motorist pulled over thinking he'd been hit by a car. Zane Salzman never regained consciousness. At the hospital, it turned out that Zane's spinal cord had been severed, cutting a main artery to his heart. A murder investigation was opened by police. After learning of Zane's recent problems pretty early on in the investigation, police had established the players, Charles Beadle and Ricky Jervis. They were main suspects from the text messages sent to Zane's phone. Charlie Beadle and his girlfriend had fled town and had been hopping from hotel to hotel, living on takeaways. They were arrested 2 days later after tracing car payments to their location. Ricky Jervis fled police, and after a chase he was arrested when he was running into the countryside carrying a bag containing clothes stained in Zane Salzman's blood. Jervis would later describe what happened in the woods in his statement. With the gang feud that had recently been happening, they were looking for the supplier William Dale, but he could not be traced. It was a few days later they learned of Dale and his floating stash house, supplying dealers from the canal boat. Police obtained a court warrant to bug the boat. William Dale was recorded talking to an associate. William Dale was recorded laughing about Beadle and the murder victim Zane, saying a horrible little effort that Charlie is. You know what I mean? Cut his fingers off, cut his toes off, cut his ear off, anything, but kill the guy. Come on. William Dale was kept under surveillance. With William Dale, police knew he was not connected to the murder. He was the supplier. He was arrested a few days later, and he was charged with firearm offences and supply and possession of Class A. Ricky Gervais, Charles Beadle and Julia Howard were charged with murder. At Chester Crown Court, Charles Beadle was sentenced to 27 years for murder. Ricky Gervais was also sentenced to 27 years for murder. Julia Howard, who was 36 years old, a student forensic psychologist who acted as the driver, was cleared of murder, but convicted of perverting the course of justice, and was jailed for 3 years. William Dale, the supplier, who was 25 years old, was jailed for 14 years after he admitted distribution of Class A and firearms offences. Passing sentence, the judge, Mr. Justice Robert J., said, "I have no doubt that the motive of both of you was to punish Zane Salisman for what you felt was his cheeky attitude over time. You, Charles Beadle, knew that the weapon had gone. You, Ricky Gervais, at the very least believed that it was highly likely it had gone. And both were in a mind to punish Zane Salisman." Beadle and Gervais, small-time dealers, managed the entire takeover of a town, creating a 30 grand a month business by making the town dealers work for them. Probably the most insane was Charles Beadle's girlfriend Julia Howard, a student learning to be a forensic psychologist, who was the driver. You can't make this stuff up. Gervais and Beadle went after Zane Salisman, who was afraid of them, to the point of going into hiding. But what cost Zane Salisman his life was a weapon he sold for a fix. A weapon that could have connected the duo to more crimes. To this day, it has never been recovered.